All right, so we're going to open it up to the audience for about a half hour for questions. Do we have a mic going around, or is people just going to kind of talk loud? We'll start there.
I have a question. Maybe this is for me, no one else. I'm a student here at the Art Institute. I have a year to go in my major in advertising. And just recently I applied for your internship position with Boulder, Colorado. I'm just curious, pending right now.
Like being my intern? Or I am an intern and I'm no longer going to be an intern.
An internship position
Okay.
in Boulder, Colorado. And I was just curious what I had to do for you to personally consider me for that position.
That you want to, what part of the business? Interactive architecture.
And you brought my portfolio.
You did. Oh, we should. You're in. You're in. All right. He gets it because he's the first one. Okay, like keep doing that.
That's like the best $65 you've ever spent.
Actually, part.
It's not even your portfolio. You're just holding up a black thing. Yeah.
You mentioned fear and the idea if you face your fear, you're free of your fear, which is creativity, really. And so many of us have clients where they're so afraid to do this, afraid to do that, afraid to spend this, afraid to do that. Could you speak to that?
I guess there's two remedies for fear, right? And one is to stop being afraid, I guess. And I think that one's superior. And the other one is to change what you're afraid of. You know, I had a guy who worked for me, and he said to me one time, he said, "Why is it so many people are afraid of so many things, but it's never mediocrity that they're afraid of?" And so that potentially I think is a good one to maybe if you've got some people or you've got some folks that are afraid in your life or around you, you can maybe channel that energy. You know, I believe a lot in the judo of life, you know, and harnessing energy. There's often when you're dealing with clients, there's what you might think is negative energy, right? And what we try to coach people to do is it's just think of it more as energy, and what's very difficult is to just oppose it. What's pretty easy is to kind of deflect it, and so you know, energy being a good thing and you need it. If you can just deflect it into the right spaces, that's usually a potential remedy. And then I would have to know the exact circumstance to give you any more than that.
Right here, dude.
Yes. I love your hat, by the way.
Hey, thanks very much. I live in California.
Is that why you have that? You could live anywhere with that hat.
I've been stoked on your work, and I saw it at the bar first, and I didn't know you or who you are.
Oh, okay.
How it came down, but I saw it on television. It's good stuff, but I had a question.
Okay.
And you guys touched on a little bit about brand equity, right? And my
Yeah.
question is, I wrote a bunch of them down, but I've just distilled it down to this. It's like, I'm just wondering, like, how much does brand equity play into your work? Like, your executions in Volkswagen are obviously brand equity, whereas Burger King looks a little bit Jackass and Spike Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, like, where do you go next, and where are the legs in Burger King versus you got legs with VW because it's built around brand equity.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Brand equity, I don't see longevity.
Yeah.
Like your executions of Burger King, like they're really funny, but they look more like one-offs versus.
Well,
really, I mean.
yeah. No, that's a good question.
Because I was really stoked the first one I saw.
Yeah. But you'll be all right. We'll work through this right now. Creating the way we look at it with something like Burger King is some of your work is going to create intellectual property, right? And some of it isn't. So the king is intellectual property that we create, and then
It's Jack.
what's that?
It's an execution that looks like Jack was first,
It might be because you're from here. A lot of people don't even know Jack exists. I mean, there's like parts of the... What's that? No, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's because you're from here. But
yeah.
yeah.
You're right. I got you.
Yeah. So the Burger King was around a long time ago. Like when I was a kid, I grew up in Miami, and Miami, strangely enough, is like the birthplace of Burger King. So as a Miami kid, you were like, Burger King, cool, you know, McDonald's, right? So we just brought back the King. That is an equity that we pulled from their past. They had sometimes you look at brands, and we had seen this in Burger King, and we coined this phrase, the equity crusher. When a company, for whatever reason, takes equities and won't let them survive as they move from space to space, right? We did work with Miller for a while, and Miller, great brand, been around for a long time, has very few equities, whereas Budweiser has a tremendous amount of equities. What, Miller? So
It was the Man Rules campaign.
So we
right?
did the Man Laws campaign,
Man Laws.
right? Which we thought was pretty fun, and there was equity. And then the client wanted to move past that campaign, and we thought that's fine. You move past things, but don't kill it to move past it. Yet their corporate culture was every time you did a new campaign, you kind of killed the old one in the press. And Budweiser's never done that. When they need the frogs, they bring out the frogs. When they need that dog, they bring out the dog. When they need the horses, they bring out the horses. And that's a brilliant way to do things. So with Burger King, there's been things like the Whopper Jr. is a character, the Burger King's a character, the Subservient Chicken's a character, and we've used those characters in video games that we've launched with Burger King. And we don't use them all the time, to your point. We don't go to them all the time. So not everything's in equity, but we do pull them out when we think we need them and when we think the mission is big enough, right? So the King is only used to launch things like a whole new day part. Like, hey, we're in breakfast and you didn't know we were in breakfast. So he's sort of a heavy lifting dude, No, he's actually pretty much a piece of intellectual property.
It's fun.
I think by definition, he definitely is.
We do a lot of research at Jack. Obviously,
yeah.
just Burger King, and
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard the King as derivative of Jack, because I think they do own different spaces. Jack is very much solidly positioned as like the founder, CEO.
Well, it's just weird how we use critters to sell burgers, like whether it's the Hamburglar or the thing about the King that was weird is, and Jack, you did it too, where you actually direct a strange critter at adults, right? Which most burger companies don't, right?
Yeah, or they did it in the weird McDonald's way, where they were directed towards kids.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. McDonald's is they use that equity towards kids.
You mentioned not killing off a campaign to maybe introduce a new one. I think one of the most interesting brands out there who I think understands that is Geico, who has allowed the Martin Agency out of Richmond to have several different campaigns alive at the same time,
right.
And don't
right.
go through this, oh, well, you have to kill this campaign because you're going to introduce this one.
Right. Right.
I think they've done a brilliant job.
Yeah, it's really smart.
Yeah.
More of a process question for you guys creatively. You kind of touched on it earlier when we were talking about Volkswagen work and Burger King work, where you're kind of looking at the conventions of the brand and industry perhaps that you're in, and what can we do to defy those conventions as an approach to your creative executions. I'm wondering what other kind of questions you guys kind of ask when you're starting out with a new situation or a new client, from a creative development process.
Yeah. Man, there's so many. It's really difficult to say what the questions are that you ask, and it's always different depending on how long the brand's been around, right? What's been the recent history? Are things good? Are things bad? But it started with Truth, where we had to change the culture around tobacco. We generally, when we launched Mini, we had to change the culture around small cars at the time because SUVs were totally dominating, and we had to create some momentum within small cars. And so for us, it's really understanding what the product and the offer is, and not and being finding a way for us and the client to be really proud of that, right? Not to try to lie about their product to fit some data that they're getting from consumers, which I think is often a traditional advertising model, right? What do consumers want? How do we lie about what our offer is so that it seems to fit what they want? If you did that with Mini, you'd say it's small on the outside, but it's really big on the inside. And there was a lot of pressure, as it came from Germany. It was like, look, you can put a whole washing machine in the back, and there were all these photographs that they wanted to use to show that you can fit a washing machine in the back, which I just don't think I'm going to put a washing machine in there, And hey, by the way, we have these gigantic things that we can put like 3 washing machines in the back. It's like, that's not the story. So instead, we really said, okay, it's small. It's the smallest car that the U.S. has ever seen. We got to embrace that and build momentum for small. And I think that's really the key difference is not lying about what you are, finding the wonderfulness in what it is you do, and then offering it out, and then doing whatever tweaks need to happen to culture to make that work. So, with Burger King, we did a campaign maybe about 1.5 years ago called Manthem that was all about, hey guys, it's okay to eat meat. It's, and it was I am man, hear me roar, and kind of a parody on the Helen Reddy thing. But guys kind of needed that help, to say, oh, okay, I don't have to do this tofu thing that I'm getting pressured to do, and this metrosexuality is kind of out of control. But if you looked at the data, instead of doing that, you would basically advertise salads and make the Burger King logo out of pieces of lettuce. Which, yeah, I mean, it's dumb, but if you look at the data, you would, sometimes you would do that. So.
Is it hard sometimes to work around a client who oftentimes will have a product they're bringing to market and they have a certain belief about what's the most important thing about that product, and like you said, it's maybe not truthful at the end to a consumer?
Yeah.
What are some of the techniques or things you do to help get a client to kind of look honestly at their brand or their product, even to find
Yeah.
the word thing that's unique about them?
Yeah, I think we have to do that a lot, and so what we talk about at the agency is being charming, basically. So when you have bad news, right, or you have honest news, it's important to sort of do it in a charming way so that everybody can come along. You don't insult the client, and you don't present things as without also understanding the wonderfulness, I guess, too, right? So it takes a lot of work, or a little bit more work, where you really understand all the different facets, and then when you've got to break the bad news, you do it in a charming way, in a self-effacing way, and have a little fun.
I'll do you, and then we'll go over there.
I went to the Art Institute in Fort Lauderdale. You don't care. And you care.
Dude, you were on it. You
That
were
was
on
good.
today. You better go buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
You also touched on with the Jetta thing how you got kind of a not so much negative reaction, but that was the beginning of it, and how you didn't really feel reticent about it because you were okay with what you were saying because of people were actually doing it. It was actually okay. Like, do stuff like the truth ads and stuff like that. Because I think that also walks a fine line since we do allow cigarettes to be legal. Like, where does ethics come in, and how often do you guys ever turn down work? Like, are you turning down certain companies that ever happen?
Yeah, sure.
How does that figure out?
And we turn down a lot of work, and it can be, who knows, it could be the coal industry or maybe the logging industry. We don't do any pharmaceutical work, and we have a few things that we just won't touch for whatever reason. We're pretty laissez-faire, I probably would have done tobacco advertising before I started working on Truth. But through the process of working on it, I got really educated on the industry and read 6,000 memos and kind of understood that they knew what they were doing, and even when they were forced to fund anti-tobacco advertising, they insisted that it go towards teens, knowing that if you say to teens, don't do something, the uptake would actually increase. So I think that what's the question actually again?
Well, it's like you're talking about dropping capital in this society, so I was wondering, like, since that's the ultimate goal, is to put something in it to inject it in public culture, like then there's the responsibility that comes along with that, I guess. Like, how do you guys deal with that responsibility, and how do you?
I don't know, you got to do it. I think you just got to do it every day and look at it. Again, I'm pretty laissez-faire, and I believe in the free market, and even things like tobacco. You know, if you look at what happened, it kind of worked out, right? I mean, this industry lied, they cheated, they sold something dangerous that they knew was dangerous. They wouldn't admit that they knew it was dangerous. Ultimately, they paid a big price for that, and were sued pretty much for billions and billions of dollars, and that money went to so a lot of it went to lawyers, yeah. But some of it went to programs to curb smoking. So our society, I believe, works these things out, and you just have to jump in and be part of it and make those decisions and not be afraid to get involved. I think too many people think that you can just go backwards, or that you can just stop, right? You know, the solutions are forward. If we're gonna work our way out of this mess with oil, right? It's not going to be without coming up with alternatives and spending money and pouring money into alternative programs. Like it's not going to happen by going backwards or just trying to do less of what's bad, right? I don't know. You have to pick. I can't pick.
Oh, I think it was you. You were.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you say you hate advertising, if you
Yeah.
had to pick one, could you pick a campaign that you would sort of point to as being, as far as possible, everything was done right and this is a great campaign?
Not really. No, I mean, it's like, it's all so temporary, kind of, you know. I like communicating, I like playing, I like, you know, the things that you get to do. I like working with really smart people. I like all those aspects of what it is we do. I kind of think you pick the thing that you do because it helps you learn more about yourself. Like, find the thing that helps you learn more about yourself, and that's why we work, right? I don't think we work because we want to necessarily accomplish something. I don't want to accomplish something amazing. I just kind of like working. I don't want to be remembered. I'm very happy to be forgotten. I don't give a shit. You know, I like the discovery of the people around me and who I am through the work that I get to do. It's kind of an excuse, right, to find out
Beard?
something.
Have you ever seen the movie Minority Report?
Yes.
I just noticed, like, as far as, you know, there's ads that actually talk to the actual person that we're looking at.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, as far as new media is concerned, like, how is that changing your advertising and how you create your ads? I noticed that television is really no longer, like commercials, for instance, is really no longer as potent an advertising tool as, you know, online media or YouTube.
It just changes. You generally, the way we come up with ideas now is, instead of writing scripts or trying to do print ads, our original round of thinking is always done as a press release. And so, you know, the creative directors are flipping through press releases generated by the creatives about something that they're going to do. So, you know, Whopper Freakout being a press release, which, you know, was presented. Actually, I thought of that one, but it would have been presented. But then the team went and actually teams worked on it, and we tweaked the release and we changed the release, and at one point there was no, we weren't replacing other burgers, and And so we looked at that as a release as well, and I was kind of like, no, I don't think we need to do that, which I was wrong. And they convinced me ultimately, yeah, we should try it, which is great because it made it a lot better. But when you can have an idea that you look at and you think, wow, someone would write about it, then you know you have an idea that's big enough to go from one media to another. It's not media dependent. It's not a little film. It's an idea, and ideas travel really well.
Just, you've probably been asked this question over and over again, but what would the press release sound like if you were to publicize what you've learned as you, or what you've learned in watching your team, or what your team has learned now that you're helping Microsoft get on the creative side, you're having to pry Macs out of their clenched fists. What have you learned in that process?
No one has asked me that. I'm not sure what you asked. Sorry.
How you manage the obstacle and what you learn. There has to be something that going into it, when you started working on the creative side, having them embrace.
With Microsoft? Can't comment on Microsoft.
Bill Gates is
Sorry.
watching right now.
I'm sorry. I would love to. I'd like to blab.
Even though you're on the creative side, how much does media saturation of ads have to do with their success? Like I look at those Geico ads,
Yeah.
and I think they're annoying. I don't really think that they're that clever. And I even look at like the Apple Mac ads, and they were just everywhere. Every page
Yeah.
you went to on the internet. And even though you're on the creative side, isn't it, when you take on an account, don't you want them to have a huge budget so you can just saturate the market?
You know, the budget's always limited because there's so many initiatives that most clients have to do. So something like Burger King, they're going to have, dozens of new product introductions. They're going to have other seasonal issues, and so the budget really gets cut up. Probably with Geico, you don't see that because they've really got just one brand statement, and they do have a big budget too. What's the word? Two, I think. Yeah, I forgot
They have
that
a
word
budget.
for a second. I know Apple spends a lot of money. They've actually pulled money out of, which was sort of interesting, out of alternative media. They're putting it all into broadcast. But again, it's a brand statement. Most of what I think you're talking about, and this is a technical thing, but I've noticed that if you're under 250 points of media, you can really get lost out there. There's like under 150 it's invisible, and so often people want to put 150 into the schedule, and because they can spread it out. It's like, hey, we're on for 2 months at 150 points. It's like, you know what, you're invisible for 2 months. So, just for us, 250 is kind of a magic number where it's weighted enough that people might notice it if it's good. But they're probably running at much higher levels than that.
So do you think that some ads that aren't any good still penetrate with that customer?
Sure, and some ads can just be annoying, and I've made plenty of those.
I think McDonald's is a classic example of carpet bombing. I mean, have had.
You don't know it's going to be annoying always,
No, but I
then
mean,
you
they've
make
had
something
pretty.
super annoying.
They've been consistent having had mediocre advertising for a very, very long time, but they spend $800 million a year. So even some of their bad ads stick because you just see them so much. And I think that a lot of super brands that have those kind of pockets, they are able to get into your head because of carpet bombing the messaging.
Yeah.
Two questions. First of all, amazing presentation, love it, great work. And first question
I
I have
like
is
this guy.
Organization. You're an expert, but organization, what's been your biggest challenge with growth? You guys had huge growth, and I always wonder what do you think the biggest challenge has been culturally? And the second thing is, why did you decide to stay away from Madison Avenue? You didn't join WPP, didn't join IPG, didn't join Omnicom, you went with NBC. I want to get a sense of kind of that, that perspective.
Well, we started in Miami, which I think in a lot of ways is very similar to San Diego. And I love, getting a chance to speak to groups like this versus going to New York and talking to people in New York. And I think one of the things that you have the opportunity to do in markets like this is you don't necessarily have the massive collection of advertising people like you have in New York, and so you can avoid becoming generic. All right? I think the firms in New York sometimes suffer from the fact that the same people cycle through the same firms over and over, right? Whereas in Miami, we just sort of cooked in our own juices a lot. And, we would come up with ideas like, hey, I think it's about tweaking culture, don't you? And there'd be no one else there to say, no, that's stupid. It would just be us going, yes, that's exactly right. and that kind of, one of the phrases that we use and that we believe in is this notion of delusional positivity, right? And so we were able to cook in our own little delusional positivity and create this alternate way of thinking because we didn't have people that actually knew what they were talking about to kind of rain on our parade. So that answers one part of the question. And then managing growth, it's hard. We struggle with it. The big thing is how well you hire and how well you try to communicate the things that you hold dear as a culture to people. And I think we've done an okay job. Probably a B minus until recently. I'd give us maybe a B now. We've done a little bit better job, but there were times when we were growing and if just like this guy got a job just now, if you were a warm body, you were getting in, and that's not optimal for keeping the quality. Lately, our growth is tapered. It's more reasonable, and I think that we're attracting more of the right kind of people again. I actually do think Boulder has helped that way. At first, it maybe hurt in some ways, and what we like is people who are scrappy and are underdogs. But as an agency, we don't necessarily attract scrappy underdogs, anymore. Now we're more certified and bona fide, but we don't want those kind of people. We want the ones that want to come in and do something different and change who we are, and it doesn't seem maybe as easy since we're so big, that it might have seemed when we were smaller. So we work a lot to try to uncover those people and convince them that, yeah, although it's fairly big, we're disgusted with what we were last year, and we want to be something really different next year. Yeah, you?
So you've had a lot of success over the last 2 years, and I wanted to know how do you share that success with your employees and make them a part of it?
With money? Yeah. Is there anything else other than money? There's all sorts of, the main thing is for people to understand that the mission is to do new things, right? It's really sometimes hard to communicate to people because I have people come and they work for me and they're like, I'll get a presentation that's Whopper Freakout, right? I'll get it next week and it's the exact same thing. You're like, dude, we just did that. We don't want to do that again. It's hard to convince people that you really want to do something different. So, but if people understand that, that's a huge, that's really big for people in terms of understanding that they can make a contribution because people want to know they can make a contribution. We also have a lot of silly stuff, like we've got the Extreme Concierge that takes care of your snowboards and tweaks your bikes and sets you up with trips and stuff like that. We got a bus now, so that people can take the bus to work. It does a route through Boulder, and it's got bike racks in it, so you can ride in and take the bus home. And it's what are they called? Why can't I think of this term? The diesel, the organic diesel, the biodiesel. Fuck. So we have Friday night or Friday afternoon cookouts and stuff like that. And I think that stuff's all fun. We have concerts. A lot of musicians, for whatever reason, when they come through Denver, they want to play at the agency, and some pretty like decent acts. And you're like, okay, you want to play the lobby? And then one time, this is the. So when we first got Burger King, I wish we could do this all the time. We have this thing called $100 Fridays every now and then, right? Which is we give everybody $100 on just some random Friday. And when we first got Burger King, it was like a Tuesday, and we announced that we got Burger King. And I had this guy walk in, and he had this suitcase chained to his wrist, right? Big security guard. And I said to the agency, I said, you're probably all familiar with the notion of $100 Fridays, right? It's Tuesday. We're going to do something a little different. We're doing $1,000 Tuesday, right? And I've never seen such an outpouring of love in my life. So we were smaller then, but we gave away $250,000. I opened the suitcase and I was flashing around. It was like full of $250,000, and people went in and with the guard, and they checked off their name and got their $1,000, and people really liked me that day.
There's something too about being inside of an agency that is doing great work and getting a lot of press, and there's this kind of communal pride about the work. You may be a media planner, but you somehow touched the Whopper freakout thing, and,
oh, yeah.
And you're at a cocktail party, and you talk about I was involved with that, and sometimes it goes beyond money. It's personal pride in being part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I mean, getting to be involved in the mission.
Yeah. The black shirt back there, he's going crazy. Yeah. I'll try to be more egalitarian.
At the beginning, you mentioned that you read Adbusters magazine, which I read a lot as well. And, anybody that reads Adbusters knows that it's kind of against the whole advertising machine and whatnot.
Really? Wait a minute. I don't know if I'm going to keep reading it.
My question for you is, I don't know if you're reading it because you're trying to subscribe to it, or if you're reading it as trying to read the alternative, but if it's the earlier of the two, how do you deal with that dissonance? Because you're like in the industry, but you're also kind of, if you're reading that magazine, it would seem like you kind of also be against it.
Well, what I enjoy about the magazine is not necessarily its anti-advertising. There's advertising I definitely don't like, and I probably the one that's most difficult for me is outdoor advertising, because I wish there was no such thing as outdoor advertising. Yet I've definitely done some outdoor advertising, I rationalize that, and I say, well, maybe I can put something up that's interesting and nice to look at, But I prefer towns where there's no outdoor advertising allowed, I mean, you ever drive into Vermont and you're like, why is Vermont so awesome? And you're like, and you can't figure it out for a while. And then finally someone's like, well, there's no outdoor advertising in Vermont. You're like, that's awesome. And you want that for everywhere, right? What I like about Adbusters is just they're culture jammers. Like, what the people in there are doing is they're kind of taking advertising and jamming ad culture, but I just like culture jamming, whether it's ad culture or pop culture or Britney or whatever. I just think that that's kind of fun, and we get to play that way in advertising. Do we have?
I think we have time for a couple more, and then...
2 more.
Okay.
Then I got...
2 more.
Obviously, you're involved in a lot of really big clients, and I wanted to ask if you have any kind of advice for a marketing firm that works with more startup-oriented clients and smaller clients that are really forced to bootstrap a lot of campaigns.
Yeah.
Get things going without budgeting and dollars.
Yeah. One of the things that was important in our growth is we were trying to be a local shop and then a regional shop, and then hope to make the leap to national shop. And we were having a lot of problems making that move from regional. And I think Miami's, and I don't know whether San Diego suffers from that, but the U.S. ends at Atlanta, right? No one goes further south. You don't go down that peninsula. Bands don't even go down there, because it's like you go down there, you got to come the same way up. And so So we had a lot of trouble making the regional to national thing, and what we finally did is we said we will take tiny national clients over large local or regional clients. And so when someone with a $5 million local budget would come to us versus someone with a $1 million national budget, we would say no to the local thing and say yes to the national thing. It made us grow slower or maybe shrink or stay the same for a while, but what we found is the issues were the same. So I could work on Shimano, and then I could take our work that we've done for Shimano to a $10 million account that was national, and they would see the same issues that they deal with in what we were doing. And that was an easy translation, and we never could make it before. So that potentially is a way to kind of move into bigger business. We were trying to, Fallon that was the model that I was trying to follow for so long, because, Chuck Porter went to high school with Pat Fallon. He's like, we could do it. We could do what those guys did, right? And I was just a kid, so I'm like, yeah, of course we can, not knowing that it would be nearly impossible. And also, actually, it'd be totally impossible because we wouldn't be able to grow in that way. And when Fallon came up, for a while, there was no good creative coming out of small shops. They kind of reinvented that notion. We were just trying to repeat the same thing, and it wasn't going to work. So we had to find our kind of own way through. I just mentioned that because what I just described may not be the thing for you, but if you stop to think about it, you probably can say, okay, here's where we want to get to. How can I create more common denominators between that client I want and the clients that I'm starting to service now? We still service a little, $1 million Giro and Shimano. We still do that work, and it's a lot of work. Hey, the other thing is we got rid of timesheets. So other than conflicts, that would be the only other legacy I would want to have if I was remembered, but I don't want to be remembered. But if you do remember me, remember the timesheet thing. So because we never acted on the information, we'd look at the information all the time, and it would be like, look at our, this account's costing us money. If we should get rid of this, and you're like, this is the only account we're doing good work on. How are we going to get rid of that? So we finally got rid of timesheets. But just in terms of, that's just, I think, worth knowing, because unless you overinvest in the opportunities, you won't reap the benefits, right? You're going to have to risk something, and basically you're going to risk your time capital in those opportunities to get to create cases that you can then roll out to somebody else. And we're still doing it. Like, we don't have a real good way to fund a lot of the stuff we're doing around industrial design. We're just like reaching into our pockets, taking a winger, hoping it happens. But we didn't have a way to do it when we first started into digital as well. And now digital is 150 people, 100% dedicated to digital. Does that answer the question? Does it not?
No, it does. Part of the question was just also the perspective of the client budget, how that their campaigns really have like a large effect, like when you're working with a startup that.
Small clients have smaller scope too, usually, though, right? So we did a campaign recently for Pearl Izumi, which is a running shoe. Actually, they're more of a cycling company. They were trying to break into running shoes, and they're in Boulder, and we know some of the folks over there. They came over. We started messing around with ideas, and we came up with this campaign that we are not joggers, and it was basically saying, you might be a jogger. Well, then we're not for you. We're a running company, and why is it that runners always find dead bodies was one of the ads, and it was about the fact that because runners go into those alleys and those crazy spaces that joggers don't go, and but that campaign helped lift their business 40%. The scope of where it went was really small. It was like, guerrilla stuff at races, a little bit of runner's world and things like that. But within that community, again, the community is small, so it doesn't take a lot of catalysts to just light it up.
Okay, last question. I will go right there.
Long time
Yeah.
It's interesting, I was really excited when you guys wrestled away from Wyden Nike running, which was just unbelievable, but you didn't work on that too long.
No.
Would you care to share what happened there?
It was just, you know, one of the things that happen, sometimes I get as a question is, do you ever make lists of what clients you'd want to work on, right? Because I think that's a pretty common tactic. You're trying to grow your business. It's like, okay, what's our hit list? And we would make those lists back in the day. And we were always, no one who we sent mailers to would ever call us back, right? But the people that would call us were always more interesting than anything we had come up with on our stupid list. And being the sort of scrappy underdog, in our hearts, we never saw ourselves working on Nike, right? And there were multiple opportunities to engage in at different times over the last 7 or 8 years, and finally there was this opportunity, and it seemed clean cut enough, and we said yeah, let's try that. I just think that was the mistake, right? It's not a fit for us, right? It's partly because I think it's so tied to Wyden, in my mind. I think the two are inseparable in most ways, but also because I like to work on the scrappy underdog, or I like the impossible marketing challenge. I don't want to do the cool thing on the thing that's already cool. It's just, it's not who we are. So maybe we did things. Anyway, we must have done some things wrong, because we got fired, and but I mean, it's okay. We tried over and over you try to find a way to engage and their process and how they have creative directors on staff in Nike, and so that was an awkward process, and we tried to engage with that over and over. But ultimately, I think that we liked being the creative director.
Well, thanks, Alex, for joining us. It's been a great time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.